30 days. That's all American factories have left before the metal inside your car, your refrigerator, your fighter jets runs out completely. And the one country that could fix this crisis in 48 hours, America spent the last year trying to destroy them with tariffs. You felt it at the dealership. You felt it when your grocery bill went up. You felt it when the rent on that new apartment complex downtown jumped before anyone even moved in. Nobody told you why. Politicians called it inflation. Economists called it market volatility. It wasn't either of those things. It was a single policy decision, a 50% tariff on one metal, that quietly restructured the price of almost everything America makes. Aluminum sits inside your car doors, your beer cans, your laptop shell, the airframe of the plane you flew on last summer, and the casing of the missile the Pentagon just ordered raise its cost by 50%, and everything downstream gets more expensive every single day. Without a press conference, without a warning, without anyone writing you a check for the difference. And here's the part that should make you stop scrolling. The country that used to supply most of America's aluminum didn't fight back. It didn't retaliate. It didn't hold emergency summits or send angry diplomats. It did something far more devastating. It simply left quietly, permanently. And Washington never even noticed it was happening. If that surprises you, you're going to want to stay for what comes next. And if you're new here, this channel covers the economic stories that the headlines bury. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. Before 2018, North American aluminum trade was one of the most stable economic relationships on Earth. 95% of Canadian aluminum exports went directly south across the border into American factories. Same time zone, same technical specifications, same language, same logistics infrastructure built and refined over decades. It looked less like a trade relationship and more like a permanent physical arrangement. Two economies so deeply fused that separating them seemed not just difficult, but genuinely irrational. Then came Section 232, a 10% aluminum tariff, justified on national security grounds, landed on every Canadian shipment heading south, just like that. The relationship that had looked permanent cracked immediately. By 2025, when the tariff climbed to 50%, the crack became a structural break, and Canada's response was not what Washington expected. There were no retaliatory tariffs announced on the news, no press conferences, no angry trade war declarations. What Canada did was quieter and far more effective. It started signing contracts with different customers. Canada accelerated its use of CETA, the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement with the European Union, unlocking zero-tariff aluminum export quotas into a market of 450 million consumers. European automakers and aerospace companies were simultaneously under intense regulatory pressure to lower the carbon footprint of their supply chains. Canadian aluminum, smelted using clean hydroelectric power from Quebec's rivers, carried exactly the green certification those manufacturers desperately needed. Canada didn't just find substitute buyers. It found buyers who specifically wanted what Canadian production had always offered, and who would pay premium prices to prove they had it. 7 years later, the numbers describe a complete industrial reversal. Canadian aluminum exports to the United States dropped from 95% of total volume to just 22%. European share climbed from near 0 to 18%. The rest spread across Asian, Middle Eastern, and Southeast Asian markets. An export structure locked to one destination for decades was completely rebuilt. And Washington missed the entire thing because it was busy watching tariff revenue numbers instead of the trade geography shifting beneath its feet. Subscribe if you want to understand how global economics actually works, because this next part is where it gets genuinely alarming. Here is where the story turns from ironic to painful. The 50% tariff was designed to make domestic aluminum production competitive, to give American smelters an edge by making imports expensive. The logic was straightforward. The reality was physics. Smelting 1 metric ton of aluminum requires roughly 15,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. That is 4 times what the average American household consumes in an entire year. The countries that dominate global aluminum, Canada, Norway, Iceland, all sit on vast reserves of cheap, clean hydroelectric power. Industrial electricity costs across many American states run 30 to 50% higher than Canadian rates. No tariff changes that underlying cost equation. Not 10%, not 50%, not 100%. So instead of new American smelters firing up, the existing ones shut down. By By 2025, the entire United States had 4 primary aluminum smelters remaining. Only 2 operated at full capacity. That is the lowest figure in American industrial history, and the downstream damage was staggering. The price gap between domestic aluminum and the global benchmark doubled. Auto parts suppliers absorbed raw material cost increases they had no way to pass back to customers. The auto sector alone lost 29,900 jobs. Building materials shed another 18,000. Total manufacturing job losses across downstream industries hit 98,000. More than the combined total workforce of the entire American steel and aluminum sectors combined. Read that again. A policy designed to protect 140,000 metal workers eliminated nearly 100,000 jobs across every other industry that uses metal as an input. Those weren't smelter workers who disappeared from the payroll data. They were auto assembly technicians, construction crews, electronics assembly operators, packaging workers. No signing ceremony marked their exit. No politician held a press conference for them. And the consumer cost landed directly in your household budget. New vehicle prices climbed hundreds of dollars per unit. Home construction costs followed. Appliances, beverage cans, window frames, HVAC systems, everything with metal inside became more expensive, in part because of a policy described at its signing as protecting the American worker. When Canadian supply redirected to Europe, the American market needed replacement volume. The answer was the UAE and Bahrain, both with massive smelting capacity and cheap energy. The substitution made geographic sense on paper. In practice, it was a catastrophic strategic miscalculation. American aluminum supply shifted from a stable neighbor sharing a land border and decades of integrated infrastructure to suppliers halfway around the world, with shipments routed through the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. That waterway, as the world is now watching in real time, is a choke point that closes under geopolitical pressure in a matter of days. America traded supply chain stability for supply chain risk and called it reindustrialization. Now, here is the part that the Pentagon is losing sleep over, and frankly, the part you need to hear. Bloomberg published a warning that American aluminum supplies could hit zero in less than 30 days if current trends continue. Production disruptions across the Middle East following the latest escalation have left American manufacturers with almost no major foreign sources to fall back on. Qatar and Bahrain halted aluminum shipments as tensions rose. Cargo traffic through the Strait of Hormuz came to a near standstill. The Middle East accounted for nearly 20% of American aluminum imports last year. That is not a minor supply line. That is a fifth of total imports going offline simultaneously. Andy Massey from Benell Aluminum confirmed that manufacturers are scrambling. Some need alternative supplies within 2 days. But shipping aluminum from India takes 60 days under standard logistics. The math does not work. Domestic production cannot close the gap. American companies are now paying the highest aluminum prices in the world because 50% tariffs are still in place, while Canadian exports continue flowing to Europe instead. Donald Trump posted on Truth Social projecting confidence about defense production and weapons readiness. But in an earlier post, he acknowledged that at the highest end, the supply picture is not where it needs to be, attributing gaps to the previous administration's decisions on Ukraine. That admission matters because it reveals existing strain on the defense industrial base before the aluminum crisis layers on top of it. Bank of America raised the alarm that the deficit could widen to 1.5 million tons under prolonged conditions. Aluminum smelters must run at full capacity to maintain efficiency. When they stop, restarting them takes 6 to 12 months of careful preparation. That is the industrial reality the tariff strategy never accounted for. The solution to this crisis is sitting 100 miles north of the American border. Canada is the world's 4th largest aluminum producer. It has stable hydroelectric power. It has existing logistics infrastructure connecting directly to American factories. Under normal conditions, shipments take days, not months. But 50% tariffs made Canadian supply economically unviable and pushed it toward Europe instead. Now American manufacturers are lobbying urgently for the exact supply they spent years pricing out of their own market. The administration faces a binary choice: remove the tariffs and stabilize supply chains, or maintain them and accept plant shutdowns, price spikes, and defense production gaps that could take a year or longer to recover from. There is no middle path here. 30 days does not allow for committee reviews or gradual policy adjustments. And in the communities across Kentucky and the industrial Midwest, built around aluminum, the arithmetic has always been simple and brutal. Factory wages don't just pay individual workers. They sustain the grocery store, the school, the local service economy wrapped around every working plant. When a smelter closes, not because it lost customers, but because electricity costs made it structurally uncompetitive, the damage doesn't arrive all at once. It comes one storefront closure at a time, one family relocating at a time, over months and years, until the operational knowledge accumulated over decades by workers who understood every system quietly disperses into other industries and never comes back. Meanwhile, Canada kept building. Quebec smelters powered by hydroelectric rivers, now certified to European Union carbon standards, signing long-term contracts with manufacturers who value exactly what Canadian production has always offered. Canada didn't plan to win this trade war. Washington's tariff created the conditions that pushed Canada toward a better market. The policy designed to push Canada out of the American supply chain created the conditions for Canada to find something far more valuable: customers who actually appreciated what they were buying. More than a year into the second term, the United States faces a question it should have asked before the first tariff was signed. What happens when the supply chains you deliberately dismantled turn out to be the ones you need most, and the partner you spent years antagonizing holds the answer? The clock is at 30 days. The phone line to Ottawa is open. But after everything that's been done, the tariffs, the rhetoric, the economic pressure, will Canada pick it up when Washington finally calls? That answer is going to shape American manufacturing for the next decade, and we'll be covering every development as it happens. If this gave you a clearer picture of how global trade decisions land in your daily life, drop your take in the comments. Do you think Canada should help, or let Washington feel the full weight of the consequences first? And if you're not subscribed yet, now is the time, because the follow-up to this story is going to matter.